Amy Williams is an author, a healer, an artist, and coach. She's passionate about guiding families through the challenges of life by reframing them as opportunities for growth and connection. She founded Parenting Through Prana in 2018 to apply her experiences as a Waldorf-inspired homeschooling mom of three, a pranic healer, and an empathic yoga practitioner with an associate in applied science. Amy, thank you so much for coming today to talk to us.
Well, thanks for having me today, Allison. So I guess what I'm going to talk about and share is kind of what it actually means to parent through prana. And I'm going to share with you my number one kind of win-win that I love to teach and share with parents, which is the heart-crown connection. So to start with, I think we all have the same sort of idea of what we want for our children and kind of an image of what we think that parenting is going to be. And so with our children, we want their experience to be happy and loving and magical. And as parents, we all in our own way try to make that happen for them. We all try to find ways to give them that wonderful life, that wonderful experience, whether it's things that we feel we missed out on as a kid or just things that we think are good for them. And something that continually kind of gets in the way of that is our experience of parenting. It doesn't always go the way we want it to. We have the best laid plans, the perfect day, and that day our child is grumpy and cranky, and no matter what we do, it's just not going to work out. And then we get frustrated and it all kind of goes downhill. And so there are a lot of struggles that parents have that are very similar, even if they're having different situations. And when we get down to the bottom of that, a lot of times there are emotions, stress, guilt that come into play with that. And then we find ourselves wanting answers. What can we do? How can we change this? And for me, when I came into parenting, I think I do what a lot of first-time American moms do. I go to the bookstore and I read all the books and I'm like, okay, what is this parenting thing about? What am I supposed to do? Here are the instruction manuals. And then you actually get into parenting and you realize that that just doesn't really work at all. It works a little bit for a while, but you have to do it perfectly every time, or you have to use the right words every time. And so for me, I kept reading and I kept looking and researching, and I was trying to find that kind of like that underlying golden thread, the thing that works no matter what all the time. And eventually I came to the realization that I was looking at it all completely wrong, because what I was looking for was a way to change or shift my children. And the real focus, if you want to have the best experience of parenting, in my opinion, is shifting that focus inside ourselves, how we cultivate our own inner peace, how we, I'd say, put our own oxygen mask on first, right? Because if you're the person losing it, you have to take care of you. That's what they say when you're in a plane. If we're going down, put your oxygen mask on first, because then you can help your children. And our first kind of reaction a lot of times is, something's wrong, let me do the kids first. And we miss the fact that we all on our own are not quite at a level to be ready to do that yet. And so so I always tell people, put your own oxygen mask on first. But like, what does that mean when it comes to parenting? We hear a lot about self-care and, making me time and that sort of stuff. And that's great. You absolutely should do that. But we need something in that moment, right? You need something that helps calm you down. And so I found with a lot of parenting books, it was saying, just be calm through this, but not how to calm down. And yes, there's the classic breathe and count to 10 and that sort of stuff. But there weren't a lot of like long-term, make it a lifestyle practices that I was finding. And so as I became a pranic healer, and I got deeper into pranic healing and arhatic yoga, I started finding a lot of overlap between what I was being taught through those spiritual practices and those lifestyles and what it was that I actually wanted to be accomplishing as a parent. And of course, the very first thing I did was make the mistake of thinking, how do I teach all of this to my children? But it's so much more advanced. You know, they really, you shouldn't be teaching it to them when they're little like that. And so it really comes down to learning how to be a human being that's worthy of imitation. So I'm not sure if Allison mentioned, but I also homeschool, and we use a Waldorf method. And that was something that came through for me with the Waldorf method, was really that it's not about what you teach the child as far as the lesson, but what example are you setting as a human being for them to observe and follow. So those are things all kind of came together for me, and that's a lot of where parenting through prana developed and came from. So as I looked more into how do I use energy and how do I, you know, imbue and radiate out of me what it is that I want to set as the example for my children, and how can that positively impact them. The one thing that I kept coming back to over and over and over again was this heart crown connection. The connection between activating our hearts, what happens in our crown chakra, and the positive influence that that has just in every level of our lives. And so the reason I call this a win-win is because we want our kids to be happy, right? Yes, there's a part of us that, due to our own programming and stress, we want them to be obedient. But I really feel as a society, we're even starting to shift into a new paradigm in parenting, away from just simple obedience, but into them following their authentic heart centers and being the souls that they are. And so as parents, we're less in a position now, especially if you are on a more open, enlightened spiritual path, and you're willing to do that internal work. I feel like we're here more as caregivers, and to hold the space to allow them to unfold in that way. And I feel like a lot of past generation parenting paradigms is more of, how do I mold them into what I think they should be? So if we approach parenting as that's kind of the goal of parenting, right? Then we have to look at, how do we do that in ourselves so that we can make the space for them to unfold? How do we hold that space for them? Okay, so I'm trying to think of the simplest way to explain it all, because I know we only have like 20 minutes here. When you, in pranic healing, part of what we're taught is that when you activate the heart chakra, it actually regulates your lower chakras. So the solar plexus, where you're going to have a lot of stress, and all of the kind of, what I like to say, the feelings that we try to run away from. When you activate your heart, it imbues your aura with pink loving energy. And that helps to calm down and soothe and start to transmute some of the stresses that we are already going through. So when you activate your heart, you have immediate results towards what you're trying to achieve. You can't be super stressed out and make good decisions for your kids. And this is what I found too with a lot of parenting books. They're like, say these words, you know, you say when instead of if when you're trying to get them to do things, and you give choices this way and you do that. But if you're saying it through gritted teeth and you don't feel the love in your heart, your child knows. It doesn't matter if you're saying the right words. And honestly, for me personally, I started to feel like it was kind of a psychological manipulation of the child, where it's like, let's pretend like the words I'm saying are what I mean, when we both know I feel completely differently about this, you know? So they pick up our energy faster than anything else, faster than your actions, faster than, you know, the way you're going to speak to them. They can feel that energetic exchange. And they're so psychic when they're little too. You know, they're so connected to you in ways we don't even realize. And I found that out with my children a lot, where they were like, you know, it's almost like they were reacting to the thoughts I was having about things more than the words or the actions that I was taking. And so I had to think, like, what's the underlying chord, you know, that cuts through all of that? Because the right words don't always work, the right actions don't always work, and you can't always like it's the energy, you know, so you have to work from the energy. And if you can cultivate the energy, then everything else can follow. And that's something else we learn in pranic healing, is how, you know, the energy is the blueprint of what happens around us in the physical world. So when we activate the heart, we start to get that energy right. And when we do that, it calms us down. But there's a wonderful secondary thing that happens, is that when you activate the heart, it activates the crown. And when the crown opens up and is activated, and this is why part of what we do with the meditation on twin hearts, is you now have a more open source for allowing divine energy to come in. And when that divine energy starts to come down through the crown, it helps to make our thoughts more clear. It makes our emotions even more regulated. It gives us access to a higher space of intuition. So now when you're trying to figure out what to do as a parent, you're not just coming from inside of you and all of your stress. You're actually connected up into a higher power, and you're allowing that to flow in. So now when you're trying to make a decision, you're not coming, like, I think we all know that when you're super stressed out and you're trying to figure out what to do about something, we've all had the, like, what are we going to have for dinner dilemma, right? Like, you can't even, like, it's such a simple thing. It should be easy. Like, it doesn't matter. You eat to live, right? But we can make that, like, our humanness can make that such a hard, difficult thing. When you activate the heart and you activate the crown, if you apply that to not just dinner, but even much harder things with your children, it's a way of making it easier. It just makes it easier. So it's like kind of removing some of the debris and allowing yourself to have more access to that information, so that when you're asking, what should I do? You're not just asking your monkey mind that's jumping around crazy trying to find some kind of solution. You're actually open and receptive to receiving guidance through your intuition. So when you are in that state, and I think we've all been around someone who was super loving, right? Like, I hope that everyone who watches this has had the experience of being around at least one person, or even if it's like a great spiritual teacher that you've been around or know of. And when you're around them, like, the love that pours out of them makes whatever you're dealing with not so important anymore, right? It makes it easier. You just feel comforted. Even if you still have the problem and the problem didn't go away, you feel comforted. And I believe that as parents, as we work on ourselves and we grow spiritually, that is part of our role for our children. It's not necessarily to take away their problems or to distract them from their problems or to always say and do the right thing, but simply to kind of allow ourselves to be that well of love and calm in their lives. And a lot of times we find ourselves being like, calm down, right? There's nothing calm about that. We're freaking out, they're freaking out, and we're like, you have to stop freaking out before I can stop freaking out. But that's the reverse of what it should be. Like, as adults, as the people who have been here, I find a lot of times we are expecting greater things of our children than we are capable of ourselves. So that's why I say put your own oxygen mask on first. The first thing that to do to really start applying this is to develop a will towards activating that heart chakra, so you can activate the heart crown connection and bring that beingness into those moments. Now, I always say practices and not stressful situations. Like, you don't wait to practice dribbling and find out if you are good at basketball when you're on the court with a $50,000 shot, like, hanging off of one shot. You don't wait till then to find out whether or not you know how to do anything with a basketball. So we should not expect that of ourselves in parenting. You should not expect that if you don't practice these things when you are on your own and in a calmer space, that suddenly when you're in the most stressful situation, and a lot of times with our kids, it can feel very it can feel very daunting, like this decision is everything. Like this decision makes or breaks the rest of their life. You know, do I let them go? Do I not let them go? Do we do this? Do we do that? Right? You can't wait till those moments to practice because you're going to fail. let's just be honest. You don't walk into a gym never having lifted weights and go straight to like bench pressing 500 pounds. I mean, you can try, but you're probably going to get hurt, right? Or you're just not going to be able to do it. So we have to practice this on our own. And one of the ways that I teach to do this is simply through saying, I love you. And you focus on your heart. And I'll give credit that this is actually a technique that I like to employ, that I learned the most about through Matt Kahn. But I have found that as I have started to use it more and teach it more, it's really the basis of every spiritual practice I've ever found. Every spiritual practice, although if a spiritual teacher came up to you and said, just love yourself, that will be enough. Like, it's not enough. We wouldn't understand. We would need more. But the deeper you get, the more self-love, loving oneself, activating one's heart, allowing oneself to be filled with love energy, we can start to see that that is connected all across the globe, right? Even in pranic healing, when we look at a cancer protocol, part of what you do is send the person love. And there's so many ways that I could talk for an hour on just how many ways it comes up. But when you focus on your heart and you focus in on whatever you're feeling, and you give yourself permission to recognize that no matter what the situation is, no matter what's going on out here, what you always deserve in here is to feel love. And not love in the way that we've been taught as a society, but think of love as simply an energy, as a frequency, as a specific component. Sometimes it helps to think of it in the way you would think of a color palette, right? We don't have an emotional attachment to the color pink. And when we say love, we have an emotional attachment. It means a certain thing based on our programming so far in our lives. So I want you to try to like waylay that programming and think of it more as just a color. And let's say that you deserve and you will be your healthiest and best self if you are filled with the color pink all the time. You will feel the best. That's what you always deserve. And that's where your parenting can start to come from. So no matter what you're feeling, no matter what is going on, you're simply going to say, I love you to yourself. And it seems overly simplified until you really sit down and try to do it and you realize how very hard it is. Because you'll be like, we kind of fantasize that we've done it before we've done it, right? We're like, I don't need to do that because I love myself, it's fine. But when you actually sit and you take that time to focus on yourself and into your heart and say, I love you, you'll be very surprised at the emotions that arise and how hard it can actually be at first. I know I personally found it very difficult. I thought, I love myself, like I don't need to do that. But then as you walk through it, you go, oh wow, that's really breaking things apart and opening things up that you didn't realize and creating a deeper expansion than just the idea of I love you, right? So when you're in those situations where you're feeling frustrated or stressed, of course I say practice when you're not there, but what you can do, one way that you can start to put your oxygen mask on first is when you feel the stress, you say, I love the one who is stressed. You know, I love the one who is angry. I love the one who is frustrated. And the more honest you are, the deeper healing you're going to receive around that and the calmer it's going to make you. So a personal example, I can say, I love the one who is angry that I've tripped over my children's shoes again, and I want to throw these shoes away. You can get very specific. And the more honest you are with yourself about what you're feeling, and then you activate that heart, the energy that moves through you begins to transmute and break that away. And part of why we have energetic problems that persist is because we let them sit. So if you have anger and it just sits and sits and you don't take care of it, right? But when it's fresh and new like that, you can start to transmute it right away and it doesn't have time to really settle in on you. Now, when we're dealing with our children, we want them to listen to us, right? And we would like them to see the value in what we're saying. We'd like them to follow directions. But a lot of times the way we tackle that is by saying, you did this wrong, you need to improve. The energy of that shuts them down. It makes them less receptive. So if we're just looking energetically, that's what I'm trying to just look at the energetic level of what's happening. Whether it's true or not, you know, like Master Choa says, loving kindness over honesty, right? So the reason for that, the energetic purpose of that is that loving kindness will make them receptive. Loving kindness will make them open up and be willing to listen to you and learn from you. We don't, I mean, yes, we can learn lessons because I want to open that up for debate, but we learn better from people we love. And it's not love as in like, well, you did enough things for me, I care about you, but whom we are sharing the energy of love with. Because you can love someone and also be in a state of not liking them and not willing to listen to them, right? We've all had that experience. So you want, by using the energy of love, you begin to dissolve and break down those barriers and that resistance between you. And it's very simple, but it's also something you have to work at. You have to kind of lift those spiritual weights to do it. So one thing that can happen if we spend too much time activating our heart chakra is that the heart gets so big that we kind of become a doormat, right? And that can be a fear that parents have, maybe not necessarily knowing all of that energetically, but we get afraid if we're too nice, then they'll walk all over us. But when you do it like this, when you intentionally are activating in this way, you're also stimulating the will. And by having a strong will with this, then that sort of thing does not happen. Because coming from love energy does not mean always saying yes. And it does not mean always giving in. It means that I am calm and filled with love on the inside while I make the decision that I know is right for you. It isn't just, there's a difference between being nice and love, and we tend to confuse those. And the way you'll know is you can do nice things for a person and feel really unhappy about it on the inside. You cannot love and feel unhappy about it on the inside. It resonates through you. So does anyone have any questions right now? I feel like maybe now would be a good time to kind of like do a question. So if you want your kids to listen to you and do all of those things, you have to activate that in them. You can't be telling them negative things. You can't be telling them what's wrong with them or how they messed up. The win-win is that when you activate that in them, then they are more receptive. Then that what's activated in you, they have more of a connection to their intuition, to their understanding, and they open up more. So it's for both of you, but you have to do it for yourself first. You cannot sit and tell a child, go do your breathing and calm down because I'm stressed out and I can't handle it right now, right? They have to see it. And the other thing is, if you're going to have a spiritual practice and you're going to say, this makes my life better, and therefore you as a child should do this, you have to show them that there's a benefit to drinking Kool-Aid, right? If you're doing this and you're like, I meditate all day and I do all these wonderful things, but the second they do something wrong, you're like, you can't handle it because like they're messing with your vibe, right? Then you're not showing them the benefit, and because they're like, well, you're still upset. maybe you felt better for a while, but the way it's interacting with me is still the same. So we have to really focus on how do we create that within ourselves? How do we allow that to flow out of us? And when you're just trying to be nice, it's really kind of just coming from like what you have inside of you. Whereas when you activate the heart and the crown together like that, you create a channel for it to be coming through you. It's not just you anymore. You're channeling in all of that energy and allowing it to pass through you. And that's an infinite source. You don't run out of that. And the more you do it, the more you can start to feel the difference between when am I just being nice? When am I actually in a state of calm and love and beingness and connectedness where things are flowing through me? And when that happens, all those stressors around you, like they get pushed, like you get a buffer between you and them. And that's what happens when we're dealing with certain situations all the time. It rubs and rubs and rubs and rubs away, you know, and then we have all this friction between us and our children. And we don't want to have that. And then once you have that friction and you act out, then you have the guilt. And it just becomes this perpetuating cycle of why am I not doing things right as a parent while also trying to do things right and feeling like a failure. When you activate this, you can't feel like a failure and be full of love. And it just becomes like a hindering thought in your ability to show up and act the way you want to. So by taking the time to just activate that, and there's so many ways of doing it. There's so many practices out there. Meditation on twin hearts is a wonderful one. But the more you commit to, I'm going to fill myself with love because that is what I deserve every moment of every day, no matter what. There's never a time when you deserve less love. You always deserve more, no matter how you behave, because activating the heart, having more love is what activates the crown, which gives you the tools and everything that you need to show up in the ways you want to create the parenting and the family that you want to create.